Welcome back to another episode of True Crime Untold Cases. Today we journey to the serene French Alps, where the tranquil beauty of Lake Annecy became the backdrop for one of Europe's most baffling murder mysteries. In September 2012, a family vacation turned into a nightmare when a British family and a French cyclist were gunned down in broad daylight. The only survivor? A 4-year-old girl who remained hidden under her dead mother's skirt for 8 hours. As investigators would soon discover, this wasn't just a random act of violence. Behind the brutal executions lay a web of encrypted files, secret bank accounts, and a father's mysterious past that spanned continents. Tonight, we dive into the unsolved case that continues to haunt two nations. Let's begin. The tranquil beauty of Lake Annecy, nestled in the French Alps, stands in stark contrast to the horrific events that unfolded there on September 5, 2012. On that warm autumn afternoon, what began as a peaceful family vacation would transform into one of France's most perplexing and haunting unsolved crimes. The Al-Hili family, Saad, his wife Iqbal, and their 2 young daughters Zainab and Zina, had driven their maroon BMW from their home in Surrey, England, to enjoy a camping holiday in the picturesque Haute-Savoie region. They couldn't have known that their journey would end in a remote forest lay-by near the village of Cheveline, where a scene of unimaginable violence would soon unfold. At approximately 3:45 p.m., a British cyclist named Brett Martin came upon what he initially thought was a car accident. The family's BMW was idling, its wheels still spinning in reverse against a small earthen bank. As he drew closer, the full horror of the scene became apparent. Inside the vehicle, he found 3 bodies: Saad Al-Hili in the driver's seat, his wife Iqbal, and her mother Suhaila Al-Alaf in the back. All had been shot multiple times in the head with clinical precision. A few meters away lay the body of Sylvain Mollier, a local French cyclist who appeared to have stumbled upon whatever had transpired. He had been shot 7 times, his body lying on the ground next to his bicycle. But perhaps most heartbreaking of all was the discovery of 7-year-old Zainab Al-Hili, who had been shot in the shoulder and pistol-whipped so severely that doctors would later need to place her in an induced coma. What investigators didn't know at the time was that 4-year-old Zina was still alive, huddled beneath her mother's skirt in the back of the car. She would remain there, motionless and terrified, for 8 hours until specialized forensics officers finally discovered her. When gently questioned later, she could only say that she had heard noise and shouting before her mother told her to get down. The initial investigation revealed that the killer or killers had used a rare 7.65mm Luger P06 automatic pistol, a weapon that was standard issue for the Swiss Army in the early 1900s. The precision of the shooting suggested professional training. Each victim had been shot twice in the head, except for Mollier, who seemed to have taken the brunt of the attacker's fury with 7 bullets. As French investigators, led by prosecutor Eric Maillard, began to dig deeper into the background of Saad Al-Hili, they uncovered layers of complexity that would transform this from a seemingly random act of violence into something far more intricate. Saad, they learned, was not simply the suburban British engineer he appeared to be. Born in Baghdad, Iraq, Saad had fled to Britain with his family in the 1970s during Saddam Hussein's rise to power. He had inherited several accounts from his father containing substantial sums of money spread across banks in Switzerland and other countries. Many of these accounts were hidden behind complex offshore structures and shell companies. On his computers, investigators found encrypted files that took months to crack, leading to speculation about industrial espionage or involvement with intelligence services. But perhaps most intriguing was the bitter inheritance dispute between Saad and his brother Zaid over their father's estate. The brothers had stopped speaking to each other, and Saad had even installed security cameras at his home in Surrey, telling friends he feared for his safety. He had changed the locks on their father's property in Spain and taken documents that Zaid claimed were rightfully his. The investigation soon expanded beyond France's borders, with police forces from Britain, Iraq, Switzerland, and other countries joining the hunt for answers. They explored multiple theories. Was this a professional hit related to industrial espionage? Could it be connected to Saad's Iraqi heritage and his father's exile? Was the inheritance dispute with his brother more sinister than it appeared? Or was Sylvain Mollier, the French cyclist, actually the intended target, with the Al-Hillis being unfortunate witnesses? Each lead seemed to open up new possibilities while simultaneously leading to dead ends. Investigators interviewed hundreds of witnesses, collected thousands of documents, and pursued countless tips. They even arrested Zaid al-Hilli in 2013, but released him without charges after determining he had been in Surrey on the day of the murders. The case became even more mysterious when investigators learned that Iqbal al-Hilli had been previously married to a man who had died of a heart attack on the same day as the shootings, though in a different country. While this was ultimately deemed a coincidence, it added another layer of intrigue to an already complex case. The forest lay-by where the murders took place was known locally as the Place of the Dead, due to its use by the French resistance during World War II to execute Nazi collaborators. This dark historical echo seemed to underscore the sinister nature of the crime that had occurred there decades later. As weeks turned into months and months into years, the investigation continued to generate new theories, but few concrete answers. The French police maintained that they were dealing with a pre-planned assassination rather than a random act of violence, but the question remained, who was the real target? Some investigators believed that Mollier, the French cyclist, might have been the primary target. They discovered that he had recently left his job at a nuclear materials company and was in a relationship with a wealthy heiress to a pharmaceutical company. Could his death have been related to industrial secrets, with the Al-Hillis simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time? Others remained convinced that Saad al-Hilli was the intended target, pointing to his mysterious past, the encrypted files on his computer, and the complex web of international bank accounts he had inherited from his father. The precision of the killing suggested professional involvement, leading some to speculate about the possible involvement of intelligence services. The complexity of the al-Hilli case only deepened when investigators began to unravel the contents of Saad's encrypted computer files. While many contained mundane business and personal documents, others hinted at potential connections to aerospace and satellite technology. As a mechanical engineer specializing in satellite technology, Saad had worked on sensitive projects for Surrey Satellites, a leading company in the field. This led some investigators to explore whether industrial espionage might have played a role in the murders. Adding another layer of intrigue, French investigators discovered that Saad had made several trips to Switzerland in the months leading up to his death. Bank records showed he had attempted to withdraw large sums of money from a Geneva account that had belonged to his father. Some speculated that these financial movements might have attracted unwanted attention, possibly from individuals or organizations monitoring such transactions. The investigation also revealed that Saad's father, Kadim, had maintained connections with Iraq's nuclear program before fleeing the country. While working as an engineer in Baghdad, he had been involved in projects that later attracted the interest of Western intelligence agencies. After his death in Spain in 2011, Saad had inherited not only his father's money, but potentially sensitive information as well. This revelation prompted some investigators to consider whether the murders might have been connected to historical events dating back decades. The role of Sylvain Mollier, the French cyclist, continued to puzzle investigators. His background check revealed that he had worked for Chazus, a subsidiary of nuclear power giant Areva, manufacturing zirconium components used in nuclear reactors. Though he had recently taken leave from his job, his connection to the nuclear industry raised questions about whether he might have been more than just an innocent bystander. Further investigation into Mollier's personal life revealed that his relationship with Claire Schutz, heiress to a pharmaceutical company, had caused tension within her family. Some investigators wondered if this personal drama might have somehow escalated into violence, though no evidence ever emerged to support this theory. In 2013, the case took another turn when police discovered that a former French Foreign Legion soldier had been in the area at the time of the shootings. The man, identified only as Soldier X in media reports, had a history of psychological problems and access to weapons training. However, after extensive questioning and forensic analysis, investigators concluded he was not involved in the murders. The investigation was further complicated by the limitations of forensic evidence at the scene. The remote location, combined with the 8-hour delay before the crime scene was fully secured, meant that crucial physical evidence might have been lost. The murder weapon was never found, despite extensive searches of the surrounding forest and lake bed. Shell casings recovered from the scene showed no useful DNA or fingerprint evidence. Perhaps most frustrating for investigators was the fact that young Zina, who had survived by hiding under her mother's skirt, was too traumatized and too young to provide any meaningful description of the killer or killers. Her sister Zainab, who had been shot and beaten, had no memory of the attack due to her injuries. The only 2 witnesses who might have identified the perpetrator were left unable to help. The British media became particularly interested in the case when it emerged that Saad had written a letter to his brother Zaid in 2011, expressing fear for his life and suggesting that someone was after him. The letter, discovered among his papers after the murder, seemed to indicate that Saad believed he was being targeted, though he never specified by whom. By 2014, French prosecutors had interviewed more than 800 witnesses across multiple countries and compiled over 10,000 pages of documents related to the case. They had explored connections to intelligence services, industrial espionage, organized crime, and family disputes. Yet despite this massive investigative effort, they seemed no closer to identifying the killer or understanding the true motive for the murders. The case took another unexpected turn when investigators learned of a series of burglaries in the area around the time of the murders. These break-ins had targeted isolated chalets and holiday homes, leading some to speculate about a possible connection to organized crime networks operating in the region. However, like so many other leads in the case, this theory ultimately led nowhere. The surviving Al-Hili children were eventually taken in by family members in Britain, their young lives forever marked by the tragedy they had endured. Zainab, who had suffered severe head injuries in the attack, made a remarkable physical recovery, but remained deeply traumatized by the events. Zina, too young to fully comprehend what had happened, would grow up with only fragmented memories of that terrible day. As the years passed, the case began to take on an almost mythical quality in the annals of unsolved crimes. The combination of its brutal efficiency, international scope, and numerous possible motives made it particularly fascinating to true crime enthusiasts and amateur sleuths. Online forums dedicated to the case generated countless theories, ranging from plausible to wildly conspiratorial. The international dimension of the case continued to grow when, in 2015, investigators discovered previously unknown connections between Saad al-Hili and several technology firms in Eastern Europe. These companies, primarily dealing with satellite communications and aerospace technology, had conducted business with Surrey Satellites during Saad's tenure there. While this initially seemed promising, detailed investigation of these leads ultimately proved as frustrating as earlier avenues of inquiry. The French authorities, led by prosecutor Véronique Dizot, remained committed to solving the case even as years passed. In 2017, they made headlines by announcing they were exploring a new theory involving a potential link to a series of unsolved murders in the region during the 1990s. These killings, like the Annecy shootings, had been characterized by their precision and use of similar caliber weapons. However, forensic analysis failed to establish any concrete connection. One of the most intriguing developments came in 2018, when previously sealed documents from Iraqi intelligence archives were made available to investigators. These files contained information about Qadim al-Hilli's activities before leaving Iraq, including his work on various engineering projects during the 1970s. The documents suggested that he might have had access to sensitive information about Iraq's early nuclear program, raising questions about whether this historical connection might have somehow led to his son's murder decades later. The investigation took another turn when researchers discovered unusual patterns in the financial transactions occurring through Saad's inherited Swiss accounts. In the months before his death, there had been several attempted accessing of these accounts from IP addresses in multiple countries, including Russia, China, and several Middle Eastern nations. Whether these were genuine attempts to breach the accounts or merely routine cyber attacks remained unclear, but it added another layer of complexity to the international aspects of the case. The role of Sylvain Mollier continued to intrigue investigators, particularly after new information emerged about his former employer's contracts with various international nuclear energy programs. While no direct connection was ever established between his work and the shootings, the coincidence of his presence at the scene continued to raise questions. Some investigators remained convinced that he was the primary target, with the al-Hilli family being eliminated as witnesses. In 2019, French police made a surprising announcement. They had identified a motorcycle rider who had been seen near the crime scene. This individual, whose identity was never publicly released, was interviewed extensively, but ultimately cleared of involvement. However, their presence in the area added new timeline details to the investigation, suggesting that the killer or killers might have conducted surveillance of the location before the attack. The investigation also revealed new details about Saad's final days. In the week before the murder, he had made several phone calls to unknown numbers in Switzerland and Lebanon. These calls, discovered through detailed analysis of his phone records, were never fully explained. The numbers were registered to now defunct companies, creating another dead end in the investigation. The case has continued to haunt investigators and fascinate the public, not least because of its implications for international security and intelligence operations. The precision of the killings, the complex background of the victims, and the complete lack of definitive answers have led some experts to suggest that the truth might never be known, possibly by design. As of 2023, the case remains officially open, with French authorities maintaining a small team dedicated to following up on new leads. The surviving al-Hilli children, now young adults, have chosen to maintain their privacy, though they are regularly updated on any developments in the investigation. Zainab, the older sister who was shot and beaten, has reportedly no memory of the attack itself, while Zina, who spent those terrifying hours hidden under her mother's skirt, has only fragmented recollections of that day. The Annecy shootings stand as a chilling reminder of how, even in our modern age of surveillance and forensic science, some crimes can remain perfect mysteries. Whether the truth lies in international espionage, industrial secrets, family disputes, or some combination of these factors, the answers continue to elude investigators. The beautiful shores of Lake Annecy, while still attracting tourists and holidaymakers, will forever be marked by the shadow of this unsolved crime, a reminder that even in the most picturesque places, darkness can descend without warning or explanation. The case has become a cautionary tale in international law enforcement circles, highlighting the challenges of investigating crimes that cross multiple borders and jurisdictions. It has led to changes in how French and British authorities coordinate on major investigations, though these improvements came too late to help solve the Al-Hili case itself.